Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the 934th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as Alex Renew. I have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Mr. Carl, I know we have a lot of administrative things to take care of first. You want to take care of that?
Yeah, maybe we'll start with staff introduction. Start with Ms. Warren. Ms. Hatchett.
With Jacobs Engineering.
President.
Also with Jacobs.
Hi, everybody. Ross, IT department, here to make sure all the AV support is good and smooth for you guys.
Mr. Vincent.
Hi, I'm Rick Vincent. I'm with Schnabel Engineering.
If you're through. Name and your role at Alexander.
Heather Kerr, technical trainer.
Great, great.
All right, everybody also should have new garage. I'm sorry, they're so huge, but you have new garage clickers at your desks. If you have the other ones, if you could kindly turn those in at the end of the meeting tonight. There are 5 buttons on those clickers. We have been having contacts. We've been having trouble every time we hit a button with our current clicker, all 3 doors open. It's wear and tear on the doors, so they're all too close to each other. So each button's going to do something different. All you need to know now, between now and December 2nd, use the white button. And then when you're back here for the next meeting, I believe it's the green button for the Limerick gate moving forward. So you just have to hit the green button. after December
Green for
2nd.
Limerick.
Yeah,
How
green
many
for Limerick.
overalls?
So if you have your old clickers, please.
You said 5 buttons?
There's one on the top that calls Paul Carberry.
Should we have that up?
Always wanted to get into the pump station.
Sorry, it's so big, but
So big.
if you ever want to go to a pump station, it tells you which button. Thank you. Green folder. So we had a big governance meeting a few months ago, and then October board meeting, we adopted some revised policies and bylaws. So in the green folder to put in your binders, probably I'm guessing at home, in your home office, we have the revised bylaws, we have the revised communications policy, we have the revised committee policy, we have the resolution on the official custodian, and then we have a resolution on the CEO's delegated authority. And also, as pointed out by Dr. Wong, there is another ACFR in the green folder that incorporates comments from the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. And then there are a few updated, we do the whole deck. Has a whole new presentation for this evening. We did shift some stuff around. We got some feedback from the board. So there is a new implementation plan presentation in the green folder as well. Some point we can talk about going electronic, maybe board type management software. So it's all easily at your iPads or your computers.
We can entertain those discussions.
Yes.
Good. Any other items?
Board calendar. Going to, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. We have 1 minute.
Okay, Ms. Huff, are there any members of the public who are here and would like to speak?
The members of the public, we do have Mr. Bovary, Terry Bovary.
Let's move right into the consent agenda minutes for October 21st. Give me a minute to look at those. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now moving right to board calendar.
Mr. Chair.
Oop.
Administrative item, I'd like, it doesn't require board action, at least be in minutes. And I consulted with our general counsel about this issue, and that is, as many of you are aware, I was appointed to the Alexandria Redevelopment and Housing Authority recently. And so I become a member of that board, and then I got elected chair. Based on, I want that to be in the record that I'm serving without compensation there. It is a public entity of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it's recommended this be in the minutes. Ms. Waters thought it would be helpful to have it in the minutes. It does not represent a legal conflict of interest in regards to it's a public authority. And as I said, I serve without compensation as to all other members of that board. However, if we get into a discussion about something specific on this, like an rate discussion, it comes to specifically, I'll just step away and not be part of that discussion. Although there is no, I don't think, issue with voting on an overall rate structure, but not anything specific that would be ARHA only, which I don't think we would be getting to. And also, probably just as an update, this is taking a lot of my time. I've given up my private consulting, and I'm also, as of the end of December, going to give up my chair of the Finance Committee of Act for Alexandria and being its treasurer. And I'm going to stay on the board, which goes to very minimal kind of expectations. So that ought to create the time. And we'll see. I'm chair through, we were filling the terms of office of the empty officer positions through the end of January. And that's when it has its annual meeting to elect officers. So we'll see what 2025, 2026 brings and beyond.
Well, first, thank you for your service to Alexandria. The city's lucky to have you with your background in all of those positions. So, and also let us know anything we can do as board members to lighten your load here.
Appreciate that.
Done a stellar job on the Finance and Audit Committee, but
I would intend on still, or at least this cycle,
Yeah.
on devoting the same amount of time and energy on scrutinizing that budget and asking lots of budget questions.
and we enjoy that scrutiny. So
So I enjoy it.
now
And the other thing is, I had said something to Mr. Carl the other day about ARHA needs to look at its processes and procedures and model them after best practices in regards to their board agenda, the materials that go to the board, the way they're structured. We're probably going to set up committees to deal with issues. So I've been using what I've learned here throughout my career and kind of like, how should we fix things? So I think at a future meeting, you'll probably see the ARHA CEO and one of her staff sitting over there, kind of watching and seeing how things go, so we can get things the city council wants in good shape.
Thank you. Thank you. No, this is a wonderful board. So let's make sure this statement that Mr. Jenks just gave is in the minutes for this meeting, correct? Yes. Good. Okay. Did we vote on the minutes?
We did.
Yes.
We did. Okay. Quickly jump to board calendar on tab 2. Carl, any comments on the board calendar?
Staff did update the board calendar to be consistent with the new communication policy. We are waiting on dates for some of the chamber events, but you'll see the Alexandria Federation of Civic Associations meetings listed on Wednesday, the 26th, and then also on December 10th. Mr. Hill, I know you attend those, so we'll have your flyer ready for next Wednesday. We'll have copies as well as an electronic version for you.
There's a high likelihood that will be canceled, but let me confirm that. Okay. Let me confirm that. Okay.
Mr. Chair, could we add the board retreat to this?
Thank you. Now, the governance committee has been very busy. Mr. Jenks, do you want to report out on the recent meeting of the governance? I'm sorry.
Glad to do that. Yeah.
No. Mr. Beal, anything on,
We do not have anything to remake in October before the last board meeting.
I read governance and I was thinking finance. Board retreat, we've already talked about. Now, recommendations from finance and audit. Mr. Jenks.
Chair, Finance and Audit Committee, being joined by the entirety of this board, so all 5 of us were there. We had our meeting on November 12th to receive what at that point was a draft annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, and to hear from Alex Renew's external auditors about the various the process and the various opinion letters, which all came back in very good, refined kind of shape. The comments they made were fairly marginal in sense of their import. And I appreciate the staff, all the work that went into it, and the fact that we have it in front of us before the end of November. And that's said, this organization, the best practices are what we do, and this is an example of getting it done, getting it out in the publics, and getting it to the auditor of public accounts, which is required by the end of the month, so that the public has an opportunity to get into the details of our finances. The only kind of glitch in the process is completely out of our hands and our auditor's hands, and that is the Environmental Protection Administration, which is our federal agency, because that's who we borrowed the fees money from. It's basically was very late working on guidelines for single audits, which are required when you get a significant amount of federal dollars for every jurisdiction that gets those, and probably the university sector and many other entities in the U.S. So nationwide, there are lots of audits being completed without the single audit because EPA didn't get the guidelines done, and then the federal government closed. Fortunately, it's back open. We expect, because the auditors didn't say, oh, we can't do the single audit. They basically did everything that would be normal. If the guidelines come out, it really didn't change much from the prior year, then they can just say we're done and put a cover on it and send it to us. If there's a twist that they have to go back and do something, they'll do that. But they said everything looked fine based on their work so far, but they need the federal single audit guidelines in order to be able to get done. So we will be waiting on those, and then we will get the final product. In the meantime, the rest of our audit, our ACFR, is here, completed and in good shape. And the staff has a shortened version of what we heard the other night to walk through.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is just a short and quick presentation of the FY25 annual audit summary. This is the 2025 annual comprehensive financial report, which is pretty much the audited financial statement of Alex Renew, similar to any public entity, not only here in Virginia, but in the country. So here's our result. To summarize our result, we ended up the year with a total revenue of $183.4 million on a total expenses of $178.5 million, leaving an additional revenue of $4.9 million to be used for later capital expenses in the future. So looking at the 178.5 million total expenses, this is a detailed visual of how the money was spent around Alex Renew. About 70% of it, which is about 120 million, represent capital expenses of the total expenses. So again, looking at the total revenue of the 183.4 million and how that was used towards the 178.5 million, we had operating revenue of 75.7 million. With that operating revenue, 36.8 million was used to cover operating expenses. The remaining 38.9 million was used to cover our annual debt expense of 21.4 million. The remaining 17.8 million was used for capital expenses. Again, within the capital expenses, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we did incur $4.9 million additional revenue, primarily resulting from higher operating revenue than expected. This slide talks about two of our main financial compliance. One is the debt service coverage in layman's term. This is a financial target, financial matrix that looks at your net revenue and looking at your net revenue to say, how much of your annual debt can you cover with that net revenue? We have a financial policy here at Alex Renew of 1.6 times. The FY25 budget was based on 1.7 times, and we actually ended up the fiscal year with 1.9 times. The next target, days cash on hand. Again, to simplify that, is pretty much looking at your cash reserve as it stands right now without not getting any additional money and asking and analyzing how much of my day-to-day operating expenses can I cover. We ended up the year with 792 days on a minimum target of 270. Overall, as Mr. Jinks alluded to, for the FY 2025 annual audit results, we ended up with, we had two types of audit. One is the financial audit, and the second one is the pending single audit that we hope now that the government has resumed back operations to be completed soon by our auditors. We did receive a clean on modified opinion on our financial audit, and we also anticipate another clean and unmodified opinion on the single audit report when the auditors concludes that report. And that wraps up the FY 2025 results.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion from the board? We've gone over this in meeting. Mr. Jinks, do you want to make a motion to?
I have two motions. Maybe we could put them together because they're related. The first part of the motion would be for the board to accept the fiscal year 2025 audit of the financial statements, and the second motion would be to accept the fiscal year 2025 single audit contingent upon its receipt in a clean, unmodified opinion from the auditors.
Counselor, can we combine those two in a single motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Quite an accomplishment.
Aye.
Clean, unmodified opinion on time. Excellent work. Okay, let's jump right into volumetric base charge, our continuation of our rate structure discussion.
Okay, yeah, slide one. I guess tonight's presentation, we're building on the last 10 months of coordination with the board on looking at different ways to implement our base charge. I know last meeting landed on the idea of per unit. I think as you'll hear in tonight's presentation, staff are trying to move away from that. Confusing with existing stormwater, even Alexandria. So we wanted to walk through, maybe step back tonight. We looked at this a few different ways on how to present this to the board, and we did not want to make it a 3-hour discussion. So we came up with one alternative to show a 5-year phasing plan that gives you a feel for what a rate structure phasing plan combined with our regular rate adjustments would look like. We're not recommending that we go a 5-year phasing plan. It was just an example to start somewhere with the board to show you what the impacts would be. So we wanted to start with some draft messaging around the phasing plan. We wanted to look at the impacts of the phasing plan across all of our customer classes. In most cases, it's a reduction in the base charge. And in some cases, it's a reduction in the overall rate for that specific customer. Ms. Fien's going to walk through all of that, and we will conclude by getting feedback from the board to help drive the discussion forward for our next meeting, which will be a more detailed version of our community outreach plan for rate structure. The intent would be, to move this forward for July 1st, 2026.
For the TO. I think I made a joke to Mr. Hill before we started the meeting that I think in my brain, this was going to be kind of like, we're going to move into coasting, but I think tonight's presentation is data heavy. So I'm starting this off with prefacing that it's data heavy. We already walked through financials, data heavy, moved to this, and then Norm is going to put on some more data, I'm sure. So, and then I think
Numbers are our friend.
yeah, I think building off what Mr. Curl said, when we get to the bill impacts, and I have Ms. Lang and Ms. Bovary, we've already announced it. We are looking at the bill impacts in lots of different ways. And I think it translates to, at times I have to say, this is us looking at the total bill impact from the base charge change only versus this is the bill impact for the base charge change plus the rate adjustments. And we look at it in several different ways. And so I'm going to try and be very clear about what we're looking at on each slide so that it's as much as possible clear and not confusing because we kind of pivot and switch a bunch as we're going through. But I think we were recognizing that it's important for the board to kind of understand and look at this in different ways in considering the impacts across all customers. Okay, so this is a slide, this is our ongoing slide. We've transitioned here to start talking about the draft rate structure implementation plan and set it up for coming back to the board next month to talk about it, furthering or progressing the communications plan around the rate structure change. The goals of tonight's meeting are to focus in on how we define the bill or the base charge change. How are we determining it and starting to communicate around it? Presenting our plan, as Mr. Curl said, notes is that it's a 5-year phasing plan. So presenting that to the board for consideration tonight, looking at the bill impacts to our customers, and then finishing out with some preliminary messaging, the communications plan for the board to start thinking about and providing feedback as we prepare to move this forward in the coming months. So we wanted to start again because it's important. I think we've been spending a lot of time on this sample of the commercial customer and other industrial and other public agency customer classes. This for about 350 customers. We spent a lot of time focusing on this, but it's important to recognize that this impact or this change will impact all of our customers. And so looking back at all of Alternew's customers, it includes our retail customers on the left side and then our wholesale customer group. And so we have 3 customer classes: industrial, other, residential, and this is really single-family residential homes, and then commercial, which includes multifamily residential. And so by and large, the majority of our accounts are in our residential customer class. But when you look at billed flows, the majority of billed flows are in our commercial class. And really big picture, we've been talking about that this rate structure change is really shifting the bills or the charges to customers that use more water and away from residential in general. So big-
That's the most informative chart I've ever seen on this topic. No, but not presented
wasn't
exactly in that
presentation.
way, with the two axes side by side.
I think that discussion, Mr. Carl's discussion, and as we were moving through this presentation, I think we initially, we kind of always strayed to the negative part of this discussion. We were always kind of on the con list, but I think that there is a recognition that this is for a large number of customers. Help of kind of resetting how do we charge our customers in a way that is equitable for how customers use water in the system. Okay, so big picture, what are we doing? We have two charges. We have a base charge, which is our existing fixed charge, and this is based on meter size right now. And then we have a wastewater treatment charge. This is based on customers' flow. It's a variable charge. This charge is not changing. This charge is changing. I think we're all on the same page there. But how is this changed? How is this charge changing? So the new commercial base charge is going to be based on the greater of either 1 unit or taking a customer's rolling monthly average and dividing by 3,500 gallons. And I'll explain more about that on the next slide. But this just starts to hit on, and I'll explain it, how we are determining a base charge for customers. So the proposed volumetric base charge, and again, this is our new nomenclature to minimize confusion about what this is in comparison to what the nomenclature the city uses. But volumetric base charge will be based on a customer's average monthly water use in relationship to a typical residential customer that uses 3,500 gallons. So we move it to how many typical residential units does a customer use. So we have 3 different customers here, examples. These are real numbers, but starting with a residential single family, they use an average of 3,500 gallons. You take that number divided by 3,500 and you get 1 unit. Multiply that by a base charge rate per unit of, we're using 10 here. That's just for serving as this purpose. And you get to a volumetric base charge of $10. So then we move up to a small apartment building that uses more water. So you're using more of the wastewater system. So when you divide their use, their average monthly use of 35,000 by 3,500, you get to 10 units. Multiplied by 10, they have a new volumetric base charge of $100. And then you get to our big user, our large apartment building, uses 175,000 gallons divided by 3,500. That's 50 units. And so their base charge multiplied by the $10 is now $500.
Clarification questions. So for the 2 apartment buildings, those are hypotheticals, right? But for the single family home, we are actually using 3,500, right? So that is actually what we're assuming a single family home uses.
So our assumption is that all residential all residential customers will have a base charge that is based on 1 unit. So
Are you going to explain how we came up with 3,500? Am I jumping ahead?
No, we're not in this.
Okay.
This one, it's based on, and yeah, it's based on the median with,
Cool. And $10 is a placeholder, right?
placeholder.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
A question. How often do you recalibrate the base charge?
So-
Because flows are gonna change month to month for buildings.
this was kind of a kind of recent endpoint where we were initially going to base it on the 12-month fiscal year average, but we've the previous slide, the actually it's it's either the minimum is one unit or a customer's rolling average,
Thank you.
monthly average up to 12 months. So if it's a new customer, we just move with the average until we get to 12 months, and then it's the rolling 12 months.
Two challenges here, right? We have new customers all the time. We don't have a wastewater rate for them. What do we set them at when they come in? So that's why we moved to the idea of doing an average over 2 months, an average over 3 months if it's a new customer, or if you've got full 12-month set of data, it's that rolling average. I think, Ms. Hammer, going back to the 3,500 gallons, we can pull the slide and we can share this with the board via email too, but we can pull the data where we came up with 3,500. That's probably 7 meetings ago at this point, and show how we justified the median for our residential class. But the intent is for now is to leave all residential customers at 1 unit.
Yeah.
And they get charged that base fee. We're going to get into this in the next few slides. But Ms. Meehan will show that some of our commercial customers are using less than 3,500. We're going to pull them to 1 unit.
So 1 unit is the minimum.
Right.
Okay.
That's initially, I think that's how we want to structure this.
That makes sense.
I think, Mr. Beal, the other question is how often you go back and update at 3,500. I think we recommended in previous discussions every 5 years, taking a look at that 3,500 because we do see it trending downward. It used to be 4,000, 3,500 keeps moving down as we implement water saving fixtures in home.
How would you use this method for single family and dealing with the winter non-use issues? It just goes away?
It stays. Winter quarter average is based on it caps your volumetric use, and that's set up 1,000 to enroll. So that's just gonna cap the customer's volumetric use in summer months.
Summer months. Rather than the base charge will still be based on the 12-month rolling average.
For residential, it's just 1.
Yeah.
I think one other thing to mention, we are open to feedback. These slides are kind of set up to get us ready for, we're thinking about public presentations. So wordsmithing is desired. You know, we took a stab at this to come up with these ideas of volumetric base charge. The way we're describing it here, this is a slide that we want to exist so somebody from the community picks it up and understands it. So wordsmithing is welcome. You know, don't have to do it tonight, but we're open for you all sending us back feedback on the ideas that we're putting in these slides. We're not trying to cook this. We're trying to, you know, get feedback to see if it sticks.
On this one, then I would just kind of note somewhere on the slide that the right to are hypotheticals, but the residential single family is actually how like an actual single family customer would be built.
So looking at the phasing plan. So we already got into this. This is kind of the big objectives when we were starting to lay out this slide deck of what are we trying to achieve? What are the objectives of phasing this out? So starting with, we already hit on the minimum base charge. It's equal to 1 single family home, which is 3,500 gallons. We anticipate to, at least as a starting point for tonight's discussion, implement it over a 5-year period. And that is really to focus in on minimizing customer impacts. With a gradual adjustment, you'll see that some customers have bigger increases. And so to, as best as possible, gradually adjust those to get to the full base charge change. We want to, as best as we can, make it predictable, acknowledging that we are implementing rate adjustments. So it's not going to be perfectly predictable, but we can, for customers, help them understand what they should anticipate for this base charge change. And then still, fundamentally, we want to maintain our projected revenues, so that includes our proposed rate adjustments. And then you'll see it as we get into the draft messaging, the draft communications plan, a focus in on the customers with increases to make sure that we're talking to them, we're getting out front and helping them understand what we're doing ahead of the potential implementation of this rate structure change. So this is our sample, our customer sample. We'll reference this again in as we start to look at bill impacts, but it's a helpful thing of there are about 300 customers that we've been looking at, and they are across a variety of subcategories with the greatest contribution in this sample representing commercial and industrial, other of multifamily. The pro was already getting on this a little bit earlier. This is our taking our customer sample and looking at their average annual use. So we have all the sample, these just random numbers are representing the sample customers across the bottom and their average monthly use. And so you have the line of 3.5 kgals or 3,500 gallons. And you see that about 21% of those customers of the sample, so you can extrapolate it to the greater commercial customer class, that about 21% of those customers use less than 3.5 kgals per month. And so we'll get into this kind of when we look at just getting to a consistent cost per gallon that factors into this, but we will for these customers be setting a minimum volumetric base charge of 1 unit. We moved one of the slides that we, as for why we reprinted the slides, we moved it up because it is an important part of the story of where we are with this impact. So we wanted it to be front and center before we started to get into the extended data analysis on customer impacts. So this pie chart represents all of our customers and their annual average rate adjustments with that factors in our rate adjustments over the next 5 years. And so you get to, if you look at just this, there's about 2,500 or 2,600 customers that will see a bill decrease as we implement the base charge change and our rate adjustments. You'll see, and then this large blue area are the customers, the 23,000 customers that will see a rate adjustment that is less than the anticipated proposed rate adjustments over the next 5 years. So for the majority of the customers, because they will see rate adjustments for our capital needs, they'll actually see a less than the anticipated rate adjustment because of this change. So 97% of the customers will see a benefit from the base charge change. The purple one. 760 customers will see an increase above the proposed rate adjustments over the next 5 years as we implement their base charge change. So there are customers that will see a higher than we're calling it average. So 5% is our average change over the next 5 years based on our current rate projections. They'll see an increase between 5 to 10% each year. So these are customers, we'll get into it, as they are contributing more water to the system than they previously billing them for. And so it's kind of righting the ship in that way for that set of customers.
Do these percentages, in terms of like what the increase or decrease will be, does that account for the 5-year phase-in?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the
so
change.
okay. So if there was no 5-year phase-in, this chart would be different.
Yeah, it'd be the purple would be, 25% would be the top number. And then the other, if there's no phase in for the light blue, you're looking at like 10%, 15%, something like that.
We have those numbers.
But yeah, we have them chunked out in the next couple slides.
Well, because I was just wondering, because if 97% of customers are benefiting from the change change to the base charge, then wouldn't it be to their benefit for it to be fully implemented faster?
Yeah, so I think we struggle with that, and we looked at the worst case customer. I think it's like 27%, 27 and change percent, right? If you implemented this thing in one fell swoop, 1 year, it's 27% one customer. We didn't feel like we wanted to necessarily propose that one fell swoop in 1 year or even in 3 years. It just felt that combined with the other rate adjustments were high. We can certainly go back. That's why we're having this discussion. We certainly go back and refine that to do like a 3 year, or if this is too intense, roll it out to a 10 year, which just seems like a really long time to implement a rate change.
No.
But we can roll it back,
Mhm.
right? So we started at 5 years by saying, all right, 27 divided by 5, and that felt okay to us, given that some of the rate increases we've done in the past for River and New.
Yeah. We've had some conversations about, in other contexts, about developing policy based on like the extreme cases and whether or not that's a good idea. Affected, and so do we want to choose a phase-in period just based on 3% of accounts? I mean, that's a question for everyone to think about, I think.
Something to keep in mind when you think about those 3% of accounts, that they are also some of our largest users of water. When you get to that slide, you'll see how much
Right.
water they're using.
Right, well, that's why, right?
Harry?
Jerry?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear. I wasn't sure if I was recognized. Sorry about that. I just wanted to add that, like Mr. Carl mentioned, you have, while there are a small number of customers, they could represent a lot of units behind the account if it's a multifamily. So even though it's one account, it could represent a large number of customers.
That's helpful, thank you.
Various incomes.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
This is taking a version of a previous slide. It's our customer sample. It's all the subcategories and taking those average existing bills and comparing them to their average new bill. So you can see that a portion of the subcategories on average will see a decrease of up to 63% for these particular medical facilities. And then right now, the sample of hotels and multifamily will see an increase. And these are averages. And this is the average cost per KGAL. And it's just, this was a point that we were making earlier with some of the customers that are below that 3,500 gallon mark. We were adding a minimum 1 unit charge to them. And so you get a little more diversity in the cost per KGAL, but generally, by and large, we're moving in a direction of very close or similar cost per KGAL. And then the purple area over here just represents of those customers that are seeing of these subcategories, the number of accounts within that subcategory that see a bill increase, what is the minimum and the maximum percent change. And so this is what Mr. Carl was hitting on. In the multifamily, there's a maximum of 25% change. In the I don't know, yeah.
So I guess that was just we showed this to you all. This wouldn't be something for the public. We showed this to you all over the last several months. And we really wanted to dive with the bill increases. We wanted to show you what that looked like. For those customer classes, the peak in there, as Caitlin mentioned, was the 25%. But we took this analysis to the next step and tried to look at the entire commercial class. We probably won't go back and show these slides. This customer sample moving forward will probably stick with the total commercial class.
That's the 24% increase is educational. Is that one of the schools? You know.
Yeah, most likely.
I know, yeah, particular paragraph. I can't remember.
I can look it up.
Is the reason why some of these multifamilies, are they truly using more waters because they have more units, more apartment units per building? Or is it that on a per unit basis, you're assuming 3,500 for a single family home, which works out to 116 gallons per day, that each of those units are using significantly more than kind of what you would see?
I think some of them, just starting to get into how many units do they have versus how many units are we calculating in that comparison. I think that there are some buildings that have the potential of having older fixtures that drive some of the usage in a way that's detrimental to those customers.
So some of this base charge change could actually change behaviors or update fixture units if they're saying, it may not be an overarching driver, but it could be another reason why they would want to update that.
That's part of the story for helping customers move.
I think we'd also find that there is the number of people per unit is all over the map, particularly on the older buildings. We've got more kids, and you may have multiple families in or more than one family unit in a single apartment.
Multiple generations. Exactly.
Or they're renting out the closet to somebody to get enough money to be able to pay the rent. So I think we find it's hard to characterize statistically multifamily rental in Alexandria because we have luxury with brand new fixtures. They hardly use anything. And then we have older garden apartments that have got overcrowding and lots of people living there in old fixtures. So it's a real mix.
I think that, again, this back to several, like maybe even last month, this is all a comparison to their existing bill, which is all based on their current water meter size, whether or not that is the right indicator of how much water they use.
Mr. Hill, we kind of put this in here just to make sure you were a big proponent of making sure the cost per kgal was printed.
Yeah.
It's slightly different now because of some of the customers using less than 3,500 gallons, but it's not $8 to $35 or $8 to $50. It's
Right.
13 or 14 and change to $15. So I still think we're providing that. We'll charge costs.
That's very informative, and that is the policy objective, right? The policy objective is sort of an equal price for, almost equal price for takeout. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
This next one just does a kind of it's an average percent change per year over the 5 years compared to fiscal year 27's adopted rate increase. So 5-year annual change compared to our fiscal year 2027 rate increase. And so this just is indicating this kind of, if we're comparing to a rate adjustment of 5%, you have some customers that on average will see less than the 5.7% or 5%. And then some customers on average will see slightly more than the rate adjustment as we implement this. This is just, we've already been hitting on this. We looked at it on the pie chart, but this is just looking at the customer sample and the subcategories, how this looks in comparison.
Makes sense. Mr.
Uh,
Bill's looking at,
Yeah, I'm struggling with
so
the.
we took the
take-
phasing plan.
Mhm.
We took out just fiscal year 27. We know this year we're proposing a 5.7% rate increase. So with the phasing plan and the change in base charge, how would that impact the customer sample? Right? And so a medical facility on average, instead of getting a 5.7% increase, is going to get a negative 14% bill
Okay.
decrease.
Okay.
Residential, 23,000 customers, instead of getting a 5.7% increase, in FY '27, they get a 3% increase.
Right.
So you see, that's the benefit of
Yeah,
the base
yeah.
charge change. They're getting a little less than what was initially proposed in the rate adjustment. As
So-
it phases in, it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. So we don't have a standard 5% rate adjustment that we can want to say, hey, we're doing a 5% rate adjustment this year. We're doing a 5% rate adjustment plus this phase-in plan for a base charge, and it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. Majority of customers are going to have a base rate decrease, and less than the average rate adjustment is kind of the messaging that we're trying to drive home.
Very well on your message because you confuse really very good. It's just the way you explain.
It is. So to read this chart, the bold-faced numbers are the net, right? That's the net.
Correct. For 27.
Yeah, don't show this to anybody.
It's not.
Like, I get it, but
It's not,
Just
this one is not,
this
yeah,
one.
this is for you all to understand the impacts.
Yeah, no, because I wasn't sure how you were doing the phasing and all that stuff. 5 years altogether, or is that
It's
just
just
one?
fiscal year 27 with one of the,
I'm with you. I'm
and
with
they're
you.
about the same. We'll show what it looks like all together.
Now, this is very good. This is very good.
Few more slides that look at the.
Imagine
bill
being on a phone call with two finance people and 2 rate consultants trying to put the story together, again. I appreciate-
Like,
Somebody
it's like they
not
all
very
walked into
Terry.
a bar together, right? Joke coming, right?
This is, yeah.
It's fun again.
Something. Oh, me too.
Okay. Back to just looking at, this is tax for residential, only looking at their base charge change. The key takeaway is that all residential will see a decrease. It's largely between the 10 to 15% decrease.
I'm with you.
This is looking, if you look beyond the sample, you're looking at all of the commercial and industrial other base charges. This is the total impact of the base charge change. So most of the 3,400 customers will see a bill decrease, so 2,600. And then about 540 customers will see a 0 to 15% total increase. So this isn't split up by annual increases, it's just total increase. And then about 140 customers will see a 15% increase and a 15 to 20% increase. And then about 100 customers here will see a 20 to 30% increase total over the 5 years. Not annual,
And this is for base charge. This is not the,
just base charge.
Yeah.
You change the base charge tomorrow and implement it tomorrow, that's the impact.
I think this is like, okay, there's 2 more. This one and then the next one.
I need sunglasses.
Okay.
You guys need to move
So this looks at, these are the numbers from the previous slide. That they associate with the colors here, so you can look at the colors to know how many customers we're talking about. But these are the total base charge change. This is the everything annual over the 5 years for this commercial and other, or industrial other customers. What happens on an annual basis between 27 and 31, fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 2031. On average, what do these different customers see? The ones that saw a bill decrease for their total impact see between a 1.9% decrease and a 0.5% decrease. The customers that saw a total increase of 0 to 5% see about on average between, well, at 6.2% to 5%. And then it goes up to that high, that 25 to 30% increase, total increase for the 20 accounts. They see between a 10%, 10.7% and a 9.4% increase.
This is why we tapped it at 5 years, Hammer.
Same.
Try and manage that dark blue bar and the pink one next to it.
So what this says, just looking at the three bars to the right, the sort of mustard yellow, the pink, and the dark blue. That represents about 250 accounts, right? Those three columns together, about 250, give or take, right? They're going to see a 10% increase year after year for 5 consecutive years. Am I reading it?
I don't know. So,
Not quite 10, but 9-ish. Yeah, 9-ish, right?
okay, yeah, we'll go with that.
9.
It's two.
8 to 10.
Eight to 10.
8 to 10. 8 to 10.
Mustard, pink, and blue, 8 to 10.
They go for
We
that.
rounded that 9 up to 10. huh?
9.9.
There's some 10s on there.
Yeah, there's some 10s in there.
Over here, yeah.
So those, that cluster of 250 counts, they're going to see 9-ish% increases 5 years in a row.
Correct.
But then again, we have 28,000 accounts all told, right? So it's a very small portion, but to them, it's important.
Yes.
Okay. That's a good chart. The colors are jarring, but no, it's good. It's a good chart.
Awake. I'm certainly very awake looking at it.
Okay. This is the last impact slide, and then we get to preliminary messaging and communications. We had, I think, this was one of the fun charts. In terms of like, there's probably 18 more columns we could have presented to you, but this starts to look at examples of customers that are in that most impacted customer set. And so it starts to point out examples. We took names off of it, because it's probably not helpful for the moment. And also there is, fluctuation year to year. We're using flows from fiscal year 24. There might be differences in terms of if something dramatically changed about these customers, they might not be the most impacted. But we start with, there's six property types. We have a high-rise apartment, a restaurant, high-rise condo, food processing entity, townhouses, and a commercial laundry entity. And we believe we were able to pull the right number of units for the multifamily buildings. We don't know that with certainty because we're looking at a customer account and then looking up this entity. But just to give you a sense for the number of units in the building. And then their average monthly use. So you can tell that this is in KGAL's. Okay, yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So they're big users of water. So these are the customers that their base charge does not reflect their actual use of the water or wastewater system. So their proposed base charge increases to appropriately account for the use of the system. So this is their current base charge. And so once it's implemented, this is the total projected increase to these customers. It's between 26 to 27%. And this is the estimated monthly impact per unit. So we took the total impact, divided it by 5 years, divided by 12 months. And so we get to the monthly impact. I think it's more clear, like, that we get to a place of some understanding of the impact per unit for the high-rise apartments. There's an acknowledgement that restaurant, food processing, and commercial laundry, these are bigger users. They may be been underbuilt for years. And so this is writing this ship to get to a place of better accounting for how much they're using the wastewater system. I don't know that I'm going to introduce these slides. I'm not going to go through every single point because I think this is where people feedback. I mean, on all sides, particularly as to how we are explaining what we are doing, why we are doing it. So this is kind of split into what are the changes that we're making and why are we doing it? We're doing this to make it simpler, even though it doesn't currently feel like it today, maybe, but it's making it more equitable to our customers because our current base charge is based on an arbitrary meter size and it's not necessarily reflective of how customers use the wastewater system. And so we're moving to a base charge that does reflect how customers use the wastewater system and get to a similar cost per gallon of wastewater treated. This gets into the customer impacts that we just walked through, that all of our residential customers will see a decrease because of this base charge change. And then approximately 75% of our commercial and industrial other customers will see an overall base bill decrease over the 5 years. And then approximately 700 or 800 customers will see a bill increase over between 6 to 11% annually. And so we're implementing this over 5 years to minimize the impact to customers. And we'll be working to communicate directly with the customers and using LEAP as best we can to mitigate the impacts.
There are 160,000 people in the city, roughly. Talk about people, in fact, who's not getting counted in if you count commercial, which includes apartments, and you count residential, which includes all other living units, shouldn't you come up with 160,000 people?
There's customers in here that we're not accounting for. The multi-family buildings in this set weren't accounting for.
You want to put the number of people then in there so that you could say you're counting for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's in the city.
I had a couple quick thoughts on this slide. In the middle, customer impacts, I would put the last point first, that it's going to be phased in. I think that's helpful context for then understanding all the numbers that are coming at you. Equitable, I like equitable. Some people, when they hear equitable, think it's like DEI rates.
Yep.
Like you might want to just say fair.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah.
Good word.
I mean, it's on there in another point, but that's a less triggering vocabulary. And then volumetric. I think a lot of people might be tripped up by the word volumetric. Maybe if you could just say it in plain language, that's like a base charge that's based on the amount of water you use or something big. I mean, we're calling it the volumetric base charge, but when you're like explaining it, that's a word that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with in their day-to-day life. So
What if we just said volume-based charge? Does that work?
a volume-based base charge.
Volume
Maybe.
calculated.
I know it's hard to like simplify the concept without getting more wordy. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out. We don't have to wordsmith right now. Those are just initial thoughts.
I want to add on to something Ms. Hammer said. Fair billing. Let's summarize this whole thing into like a one sentence message. And I think fair billing is in there somewhere. So everybody can get behind that concept. That whether I'm big industrial user or a small home, I'm paying the same price to have 1,000 gallons processed by Alex. Fair billing. Put a face to it. Who could argue against that?
Well, but
Yeah, some who are
most people say
very unfair bill.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the third bullet on the left, Mr. Hill, and Ms. Hammer, we can turn that into the fair billing That's what we're trying to say there.
Yeah, fair billing.
I think Terry had a suggestion. Terry?
Yeah, I was just thinking, flow-based fixed charge or demand-based fixed charge could be one option.
Of course.
And
That's right.
well,
If I'm a customer, the question I'm gonna ask, you guys are coming now to telling me that basing it on a meter charge is not basically right. Why you guys have been using it for all these years?
So I think
Why
Dave-
suddenly you figure out that it is not the fair way of doing it?
I think part of that is, we have the data, we're able to use data to leverage this. We've got a new customer service system at Alex Renew now. We have better access to our data. We have more control over data. It's not being sourced out.
I'm just saying, the
Prior to
way you
2012.
answer those questions and
Yeah.
explain this.
I think that's how we've been, we do the same thing to each other.
That's presenting that. You could put a why now slide in the
Yeah.
deck, right? That's just kind of summarizes that.
I don't know if that passed the sniff test, but that's really why.
Yeah.
We've got the data.
and
And the other question is, for revenue, you increase the rate every once to double digit. So
Correct.
if phasing out revenue now, why are you hitting me with these double digit rates? Something else so you would have. Really constant. People,
I've got a couple questions. Is it worth someplace saying that, let's say there are two restaurants side by side that have different meter sizes. They use the same amount of water, but because their meter sizes are different, currently they're paying significantly different rates. And that this is going to resolve that.
We could tell you the name of that restaurant.
They should have lower prices.
Name and shame. No, I'm just kidding.
The second, I'm being picky, but the customer impacts that, the first point you say the customers will experience below average rate adjustments. That's lower than the average increase. The second one, you're saying that most of the commercial and industrial customers will see an overall bill decrease over the next 5 years. And then the third one, we're saying that we'll see a bill increase annually, which include the rate adjustments. And I read that, it looks like it's apples and oranges. It's not really clear what you're comparing there.
I agree. I do find that some of these points a little confusing. When I put on my like normal person hat, like what is a below average rate adjustment?
Yeah.
I'm a normal person. I don't know what that
Yeah,
means.
rate adjustments for below average.
Right? Like, we need to just run this past normies, like normal people who aren't
Yeah.
us.
Concept. You just said it, Mr. Beal, there's three different impacts to customers. Those that have a rate increase,
Mhm,
but not as much as it would have been.
mhm,
Those that have an overall rate decrease,
mhm.
and then those will have a rate increase.
I think before you get into this level of messaging, I think we have to lay out the why answer. Why are we doing this? And I think it comes back to this concept that Ms. Hammer brought up, doing it to be fair. So I would, in a sentence, what is the problem we're trying to fix? And I think the example of two customers who are paying probably 3 times as much between the two of them for 1,000 gallons. And that's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair to either one of them. And just say that's the problem we're trying to solve by creating a fair rate program. So before we get into numbers, get the words and the emotions right. And the numbers will take care of themselves, right?
I think it's fairer
Yes.
because the volume base, our base charge really was supposed to, it was a proxy measure using, I think meter size is tough. Maybe you say pipe size.
That's true.
Pipe size, that's what was considered fair before, because that was the only data that was available. Now the data and the ability of computational ability means we can get fairer than we've been, with more precisely measuring usage-based overall fee.
Maybe we don't set someone up, I mean, that we have an unfair billing practice for.
Yeah, more fair. We were fair, now we're more fair.
But I think when you define the problem, you say in the old
We
days,
don't
that's
even
all you
have
had. You got a little ruler to measure pipe. That's all you had. That was the only measurement you had.
Plenty of utilities who use this, and probably will continue to use this.
I think you also need to explain why you need a base charge. This goes back to our discussion at the last meeting in regards to you need a certain amount of revenue stability to pay for, it stabilizes a system which is good for rates and customers over the long term. Something that explains why have it.
I think it's also that even if you are out of town 6 months a year, that you're paying for having water available to you when you need it.
Now, Mr. Carl, I know we're not voting on anything.
Who else? It might also be helpful. Caitlin's about to kind of show this, but we can also optimize messages for text customer. I think it's helpful. You can target commercial.
We can put bill messages on each, what he's saying is we can put bill messages on individual bills.
I'm just saying I'd be very careful about that.
Now, the interesting part of the presentation is still ahead.
Oh, boy.
Okay, this slide and the next slide are two example bills. This one is the residential, a draft, putting something out there. I think that there's finessing, obviously, in our messaging, but this is the draft residential bill. Just starting off, kind of shows the volumetric base charge right now. It's building off of our existing bill, and then it shows how that volumetric base charge is calculated in this scenario because it's one unit. We're not spending a whole lot of time discussing how you get to a base charge, but we're at least kind of what's your base charge calculated.
So this is kind of funny because like in the top right section, in the not the blue box part, but the wastewater treatment charge, which says on it how many gallons the customer used, which is here 4,000. But then right in the blue box next to it, it's like, we're assuming you use 3,500 gallons, which to I think a lot of people will be like, what? But that's not what I used. So is there a mistake? I think there's a potential for confusion seeing those two things right next to each other. I also think in the blue box, since all residential customers get charged the same base charge, the explanation of customers that use more, contribute more, and use less, pay less is also a little confusing because within this, at least within the residential customers, they're all contributing the same. So those were two things that jumped out at me. I have not thought about what the answer is yet.
Okay.
Can I propose an idea? We'll just call it base charge. No, explain math behind it. Unless somebody asks, say base charge. And say what it's used for. I think the sentence that appears on the left side, base charge covers equipment, buildings, and major repair and replacement. Say base charge.
I think that's right.
That's what it
I
is.
think we just almost take the math out of all the explanation.
Yep.
Base charge
On the bill,
on the bill
yeah,
and to some degree, keeping it so simple,
for residential
For residential.
customers.
residential.
Yeah.
Base charge. We, again, I still remember 14 years ago, we had the Chesapeake Bay charge. And that confused everybody. Because they said, we don't live on the Chesapeake Bay. And some people thought we gave the money to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
So yeah, I'm looking at my current bill. And there's no explanation on the bill of how the base charge is calculated.
Can you imagine? You'd have to have like a Terry Bovary, novella on it.
Right?
They have a YouTube link.
No, like a QR code.
Terry
Well,
Bovary.
And it's a series of TED Talks. Yeah. So if, in the outreach, public presentations about what we're doing, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
then on the bill that everybody gets every month, that's, I think, a different
Yeah.
thing, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Hill.
Just base charge.
Just the base charge
Base charge.
Lose a blue box.
for residential. Yeah. I do think for commercial, we need to explain.
Blue box.
What if we just promise not to read it?
Just prep for next meeting. That's the belief that we're. Down on it. It's fine.
Just Matt, Justin talking.
Involved.
If we don't put if we don't put a sticky note in the slide, we'll never update it. Go ahead.
For today. Okay, so this is the draft commercial customer bill. So this, again, we had talked about the volumetric base charge. We added C box to the right on this one. And then how is your base charge calculated? And so it talks through similar stuff and then says your average use over the previous 12 months. Average use divided by 3,500 or 3,500 gallons. And then your base charge per unit is how you get to the volumetric base charge.
Commercial. It shows in the map.
So on the math portion of the purple box, I think you need one more line showing that the charge is the last two numbers multiplied against each other. Because
So do the
you
math.
can't, you gotta hold people's hands on math.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking that for purposes of the bill, like what's on the bill, similar to how we were just talking about residential, I think it would be better to be simpler on the bill. Like, we don't need to talk about the typical home, on the bill. Like maybe just say your base charge is calculated based on your usage. And one unit is 3,500 gallons or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah.
Because 3,500 does appear in the math and people might be like, what's that about? So say that's the unit we're using. And here's how many units you used. Period. Like, does that seem simpler to understand maybe?
Yeah.
In the public messaging outreach, we can explain that why it's 3,500. That's what a typical home uses. But I don't think that needs to appear on the bill. I think it's distracting. If you're like a restaurant owner and you're getting this, like, what does that have to do with me?
We also could, I would agree, simple here. We also could put not YouTube link, but a link back to our website that has a more detailed explanation and a URL. And that way people could click it, go to our site and wallow in all of the funky stuff that gets us to these numbers.
To the big yellow sticky note in the slide, one of the things that we thought about is we do have the ability now with the data, with our new service provider to be able to project what the base charge is going to be for each individual customer. We went through this idea, go back to your building website. We just tell the customer too what to expect between now and July 1, if their base charge is going to go up or down, and put a purple type box on there and say, what's going to happen to your base charge in the next 7 months? You may have a base charge increase, and that way we can do further outreach to some of these customers. It was an idea as opposed to hitting them on July 1st, 2026 with this big rate increase. I could at least have an idea why it was changing and start messaging it.
They definitely need to be made aware in advance. I'm not sure that like on the bill is the only way to do it.
No,
I'm sure
it's-
there's
and
lots
it's
of
not.
other ways, but
We thought about that as one of the ways
Yeah.
to communicate, to show each customer what their base charge was at. We can actually do that and show them what their base charge is going to be.
Slides. Oh, final 3 slides are just a little bit more into the, you start with the communication channels. So communication channels that we've been using recently, meetings, print, mail, digital, and then our stakeholders that we're reaching out to, residential and commercial and other industrial, other customers, nonprofit, and then city council and staff. And so starting over here, residential customers, we would be proposing on the meeting front to reach out to residential customers via our public hearing, as well as Alexandria Federation of Civic Associations for commercial and industrial other, same as residential, but also for targeted meetings with multifamily properties that may be seeing higher increases. The Chamber, Alex's Government Relations Committee, ARHA, Alexandria Hotel Association, and others that may help get the messaging out. And then targeted calls to most impacted customers as it makes sense.
I would suggest 3 things. One is that you, before it goes to Civic Federation or anything, just a letter to the mayor and members of council with a very simple 1-page. We're going to start going out of the community. We want to make this fairer.
Yep.
It's just a matter of how we divide matters up and who ends up. Some will pay more and some will pay less. You know, I think just so if they hear it from us first and not from somebody who didn't understand it, who goes complains to them.
Yeah.
School board, I think I was saying, maybe the school superintendent in that case should be the best person to communicate with. Just so they're aware, and it looked like they actually may be a beneficiary. And the third I'd add, and I was just looking up their name, they're now the apartment owners, this Northern Virginia Apartment Association. Their offices in Arlington. They used to be called something else, but I think that this is the main apartment association in Northern Virginia. I think they're ones that should be on your list besides the chamber.
Mr. James, we had city council. This is probably ambitious, probably not going to happen in December, but we have them first before any other outreach will go out. Obviously, it's out for new board, and then city council are proposing to take them talk points and an informational flyer. We talked to Emily and Aaron and asked their advice if we needed to do any individual briefings or anything like that. But once we get the information over, we'll go from there. But before we even started the outreach plan, we
Yeah,
wanted
I
to-
was concerned if the Civic Federation was meeting next week, that
yeah, no, we're
somebody
not.
get to council ASAP.
We're not ready. We're not ready.
Yeah, right now
None of
we're
it.
showing
Yeah.
that, starting with Alexandria Federation in January.
Good.
Think that answer from you, Mr. Jenks, but just Mr. Carl had said briefings that requested the talking points and informational flyer for city council and staff. Maybe involved in any additional use places or else. From the print standpoint, we're going to work on an informational flyer that would be given out to everybody. I think we talked about maybe a general flyer that would be for residential, nonprofit, city council, but that for commercial, we'd get maybe a little more targeted to give them, particularly for the more impacted customers, information that is specific to commercial. Why is it? How is it calculated? Why is it increasing? Getting a little more for those entities.
Do you think it would be useful to go to, certainly not all civic associations, but to selected ones, Delray, Northmont, Old Town? Rosemont.
I think for us, we were trying to put our outreach efforts towards where we're gonna have more of the negative impacts.
Yeah, single family homeowners
Single-family
are
homes.
coming out ahead than like.
We didn't think- I mean, if the benefit's a positive story, it's not like we're gonna, but we thought, you know, given we really are focusing on commercial and the other industrial.
Yeah.
That's what we were thinking.
This, I like Mr. Zink's idea of something on the website that explains this and explains it well, which is something that Mr. Robertson does very well and your staff. But,
Agreed.
Yeah. It should be on all of them, but alexrenew.com.
This is excellent, but I'm going to give it a challenge. By the way, I agree with Dr. Long here. This is a win-win. This is a good thing. The challenge would be boil it all down to 3 sentences. One sentence is why. And the compelling reason is fairness. And to resolve the problem of disparate bills for, say, 1,000 gallons of water. So why? Give it a name. I think fair billing is a great name. Second sentence is why and why now. You don't have to apologize for doing it now. It's a good thing. I think the availability of data has made this possible. And then one sentence impact. And the impact is the vast majority of bill payers to decrease. There's some who will see increase, but for the vast majority. But again, the real impact is everybody will pay the same price per 1,000 gallons. 3 sentences. If you get that right, the numbers will flow naturally. So I think if we get into explaining the math, you've kind of lost the sale.
Is there concern that, I think fair billing is a perfect way of describing this. But if you're a single family residential user, is there a concern that you'll say, well, why did you stop the fairness with us? That my neighbor next door, I know they use 2 or 3 times the amount of water. Why are you lumping me? I'm a single person. I hardly ever use any water. Why are you stopping the fairness with us associated with our subset?
It's going to take a little work.
It would be good to have an answer ready for that, but we don't need to lead with that. Since residential customers are all winning, it would take a special kind of person to complain about their neighbor winning more than they are. Not that we don't have special people here in Alexandria. We have a few,
Is
but
your neighbor a residential customer? I mean, they're still paying for the volume they're using.
No.
well,
But
just
the
the
base
fact
charge
that
is
the
the
base charge is the same.
So,
Now, it is now. The base charge is equal for all residential customers now. It's
no,
fine.
and wait, yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I understand that. I was just kind of,
But if I'm like, if I
I would
use,
be prepared to answer
if I
that.
use 1,000 gallons a month and my neighbor uses 10,000 gallons a month, we're both paying the same base charge. That's outrageous.
but if
And
you
the
go-
people who are likely to complain are the people who see their neighbor like watering their lawns like constantly, and you just kind of have to make that argument that that's not making it into the sewer system. Like those are the people who are going to complain.
If they're complaining, talk to the water company.
I'd honestly be surprised if we get any complaints like that.
We were worried about
If
that.
we're leading with
water
your
bill.
bill is going down.
Didn't happen.
Now, Mr. Carl, I know we're not looking for a vote here, but would you like the mood of the board regarding the 5-year
What's the last slide?
phase?
Schedule. So there's FAQs, they would go on our website, and then there's a schedule. But obviously, I think we're probably gonna push the schedule this way, to the right, after the holiday, and we start with Mr. Drinks, as you noted, we start with city council. Before we talk to anybody else, obviously, we would start with city council, and then kind of go from there.
You may want to, you may want to have a quick meeting, like when you develop the material for council with Emily, just to get kind of her feedback and input.
Yeah, we called her and asked her for feedback on this draft plan, if we did
Okay.
a meeting and stuff like that. We would definitely, would run that by both of you. Next meeting, we had planned to come back with a more, thank you for the feedback. If you have more over the next few days, feel free to send it. We plan to come back with a real outreach plan at the next meeting, to the board to describe the method being the why, have some draft materials for you to react to. Again, we have some time to refine this before, we're 7 months out, 8 months out from actually implementing this at a June meeting. So we've got some time. I think if there's a desire for the board to see more data, we could run the scenario from a 5-year phasing plan down to a 3, but you can kind of do the math in your head and anticipate what that looks like.
Yeah, I want to make sure we don't get our tail about 2 versus 3 versus 5. Do you want a kind of clean decision tonight on 5? That make your life easier?
If that'd be fine.
How's everybody feel?
3.7.
Yeah, we have a dissenting opinion.
It's fine. It's fine.
Mr. Jenks? Dr. Well?
I'm okay with that. I just want to see the final method.
No, yeah, we're not.
But it sounds like 5
Yeah.
is, we'll skip with 5.
We don't need any more data. We are good.
Are you good?
I'm so
Because we're
sure.
doing a whole other analysis.
I'm 100% sure. That's some data for you.
All right. Aaron, our life just got easier.
I have one comment.
By the way, I second that. Good.
Guys, I have one more comment. I know Keg Outs is convenient to use and it takes less space, but don't use it in public presentations. 1,000 gallons.
Okay, that's European.
It's just
Like
confusing.
kilo? I
It's
don't know
just
what that
confu-
means.
It's just
Yeah.
confusing.
Sounds
Nobody,
French. Yeah.
90% of the people that see this won't know what it is.
That conclude the discussion on rate structure. Okay, now we have a very exciting topic. Climate change study.
As
It was excellent.
we wanted to come back to the board. We said we would do this. We've not last presented in April of 2020, 2025 on our progress towards the climate change study. So Ms. Orm, Ms. Patrick, and Mr. Vandertalk are here to talk to you all about where we've gotten to on the climate change update and showing some initial modeling results to the board. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Orm.
Thank you so much for having us this evening to talk to you. I know I am really eager to talk. So excited. The last update that you received on the climate study update, I believe, was back in April. We made quite a bit of progress since then. So we are to be here tonight to share that with you. Go ahead and jump in. So we have already introduced ourselves, but I did just want to again acknowledge Mr. Vandertek and Ms. Hatchett from Jacobs, who are resilience experts and have been really instrumental in helping us push this assessment forward. So We are very grateful to have them here with us tonight and grateful to have them on the team working on this assessment. Okay, so just a brief review of our approach to the study. We are going to start with going over that approach and some of the high-level identified climate impacts that we're expecting to see in the future. We will then dive into the flood vulnerability and risk analysis and the corresponding mitigations, followed by the heat vulnerability and risk analysis and corresponding mitigations. For the sake of time, we're not going to review all of the outcomes across the entire assessment, but we will get into some detail on some of the primary or higher risk issues. And then we're going to close out with how the assessment results are going to feed into our design guidelines and future planning. So the climate study looked at how flooding and heat could affect our facilities and our staff. So we started by looking first at exposure, identifying which staff and assets are exposed to flood and heat hazards. So presenting. Thank you for the rest of you. Over here.
No one else knows how to do that.
Appreciate you. So with that information on exposure, we assess vulnerability of those assets based on their sensitivity and adaptive capacity, or in other words, their ability to mitigate those risks. Following the vulnerability assessment, we quantified risk based on likelihood and consequence of impact using our risk assessment matrix. And from there, we identified adaptation strategies to reduce our risk across both our infrastructure and our operational procedures. So our ultimate goal here is to use these findings to feed into tools for design and planning, which we'll talk about more towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so as I said, reviewing some of the high-level anticipated changes in climate by 2075, we are looking at an average high temperature of almost 115 degrees. Sea level could rise anywhere from 1 to 6 feet. Precipitation is expected to increase 2 to 3 inches annually. And during a 100-year storm event, we could see an increase in rainfall of up to 2.12 inches as compared to a similar storm event today. So this is why we've conducted this study. We need to be confident that the plant is planning for and resilient to these changes. Just as a brief review here of our flood modeling. We modeled 9 flood scenarios, both current and future, across riverine, coastal, and interior flooding. So for coastal, we're looking at how high tides and storm surge push seawater onto land. For interior, we're looking at how intense rainfall can overwhelm basin areas. And for riverine, we're looking at how upstream precipitation inundates downstream channels that then causes riverbank overflow. So we can see here, this is a snapshot of modeling across all 3 types of flooding for a 2075 100-year storm. And we see that Alex Renew is affected by all 3 scenarios, but we see most of our vulnerability in the interior and particularly riverine flood scenarios. So with that in mind, for the next few slides, we're going to focus in on that riverine flooding and what that could look like. So I'll turn it over to Lawrence to walk us through that slide.
Thank you, Mallory. So as Valerie said, we did a whole bunch of different flood modeling for different types of scenarios. This is just one of those many scenarios, focusing on what is really a very extreme type of event, 100-year storm, 1% chance of happening in any particular year. This is how the storm that would happen for that 1% chance in 2075. So it's approximately 10.6 inches of rain in 24 hours. That is a really big storm. The same 1% chance would be about 8.5 inches of rain today. So we're already talking about a projected future 100-year storm. What you see here is different flood depths in the different colors, half a foot to a foot in the light blue to over 4 feet in the red. And the dark gray is the buildings, the lighter gray is the actual basins on the plant. And these black lines show you the transects, which I'm going to show you in the next few slides. Just because you have a fairly significant flood depth doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have a risk at a particular location. We use the flood elevations and compare those to the elevations of your assets, and where we get into buildings and whatnot, that is actually what drove the ultimate risk. So we actually have to do a deeper dive, which I'll start showing you in the next few slides. So starting from that transect on the west side, you can see sort of a cross-sectional view through the plant. Looking on the right-hand side is basically from Cameron Run, so riverine flooding coming from that side of the plant. And you see the biological reactor basins, BRBs, the River Renew pumping station, and then the tertiary, secondary settling tanks and filters. So you see different levels of flood depth in the light blue. The perimeter road all the way there on the south side of the plant clearly has fairly significant flood depths. And there is actually one, I think, gallery entrance point there on the south side of the BRB. So it's that type of location that we are very focused on, looking at the elevations of those entry points relative to flood elevations to help drive our analysis. Look at one of the next transects, moving a little bit over to the east. Again, right-hand side here is flooding coming in from Cameron Run. See building F there, the UV post aeration basin definitely has some potential flooding. Moving over towards the left, you see the CPT building 69, which actually Melody's going to highlight. Moving again further to the east, this is again same type of cross section, not as long because they have the cemetery on the north side. So here you have the sludge thickening basin has a little bit of potential flooding, but the other locations really no flooding from this particular scenario. Last cross section here, shown here, and some potential flooding around the sludge digester complex with this one scenario, the 100-year storm in 2075. So again, we use this to look at potential flood risk, and I think Mallory, you're going to take over and talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, thank
So really quick, just for the board, the last two cross sections that Mr. Vanderkop showed, just keep in mind that's part of the phase 4 program. It will be where you took a tour last December. That's an area that we'll be investing in heavily over the next 10 years. So it's important that we have this type of study done to be able to set elevations correctly to make sure we're not going to flood out our new facility. So keep that in mind. Ms. Orm's going to kind of bring it all together at the end of the presentation, but just to highlight those areas that you've toured in the plant are the last two cross sections.
At that point, all your design engineers for some of the projects have been reaching out to us with this information to help set their design elevations to make sure things are protected.
So that's helpful. That was my question actually, to understand whether it already has been incorporated into this project. Can you help me understand? You said here 2.12 inches, slide number 5. Increase in rainfall with 100-year storm. That's also for the duration of 24 hours duration.
Yeah, I believe that's the total in 24 hours. I mean, if you think back to the numbers I rattled off, 8.5 inches is the current 100-year storm, 24-hour total volume. That's over 24 hours. It's not the peak intensity. It goes up to about 10.
Okay.
Peak intensity, actually, I actually just looked up the numbers as we were sitting here. It goes up from 5.8 inches per hour. That's actually for 15 minutes. So it's very high intensity for 15 minutes. It goes from 5.8 inches per hour to approximately 73 inches per hour. That's as much of a driver.
Thank you.
Great. So zooming in even closer on those cross sections, here we have a detailed look at the Century pretreatment Key building. You can see we have two single doors and a roll-up door here. The flood entry point elevation for these entrances is 15.1. The projected 2075 riverine flood level is 17.6 feet. So this highlights a real risk for floodwater intrusion into this building and into our galleries in particular, with some potential very real impacts to some of our key systems. So speaking of our galleries, we wanted to give a little bit of context about what we're referring to. So when we say galleries, we're referring to underground corridors that connect across the plant to the below ground levels of several of our buildings. So you can see that illustrated on the map here, along with some of the key entry points to the galleries. On the right are just a couple of our systems and equipment that are located in these below ground areas, including IPS, building K flow meters, and our chemical systems in buildings G2 and L. But that really is just a very small sample of what's found in these below ground areas. So that's just to show that there is quite a bit of sensitive equipment throughout the galleries, in addition to people who move throughout the plant via the galleries, given they connect most of our infrastructure. So for the purpose of climate resilience planning, you can understand why protecting these key areas is going to be a real priority for us, and we'll speak more on that shortly. This framework may be familiar, and I apologize, this is a very busy slide, but it's all really important information. This is the Alex Renew Risk Assessment Matrix, which we use across our asset management portfolio. So this matrix guides our risk assessment process by multiplying likelihood against highest impact to calculate the overall risk score. For the climate assessment, we're considering impact across financial, regulatory compliance, and operational parameters, and identifying the threat scale from insignificant up to exceptional, and likelihood from very low to very high. Across parameters, there are escalating levels of consequence defined, from isolated issues of compliance up to potential for project shutdown as an example. Risks rated high are considered unacceptable and require mitigation. Medium may be acceptable with mitigation measures in place. And low is something we want to make sure we're aware of and can consider into our planning, but is deprioritized overall given the higher priority items. So I'm going to hand back now to Lawrence to walk us through the flood risk assessment results.
Thank you. So this chart kind of boils down all of our risk assessments into some of the really key points. It's a little bit of a busy chart, so I'll walk you through it. So what you have in the left-hand column is sort of the summary of the risks that we've identified, some of the main ones that we're primarily concerned with. The next column over is the likelihood. And then, as the note says at the bottom, essentially the likelihood, we took all of our different climate scenarios, we ran the models for, there's a probability associated with each scenario, and then we basically weighted that both for higher weights if it has a higher probability today versus what's going to happen in the future. That generates, 5 is basically the highest potential score you can get. And then the impact scores across there, the risk rating is a product of the highest impact in likelihood. So let's go through each row and explain. So the first one there is certainly the most significant. It's what Mallory was just speaking about. If you have a future major storm event that would impact all of your galleries, essentially would incapacitate major electrical and pumping systems, resulting in loss of liquid and solid processing. This could happen from largely both from riverine and interior type of flooding. The coastal is not as likely to impact the gallery after this. That gets a likelihood score of 5. Clearly would have a major impact. So we gave that an overall risk rating of 25. So what are the mitigation measures for that? Essentially, flood-proofing the individual entry points is one approach. There's 14 total entry points. And that one example that Mallory gave for Building 69 is one of 14 different places water could get into that whole system of galleries. So you'd have to protect those through different series of measures, and I'll show you in the next slides what some of those might look like. Or perhaps a more system-wide approach, although likely much more expensive, would be a perimeter berm around the entire plant. Those are both viable and could be, definitely need to be considered as potential approaches. The next row on here is similar, considered a future major storm event causes flooding that would incapacitate electrical systems in building 2 in particular. That would result in primary sewage pumps shutting down, leading to equipment failure and multiple negative process impacts. That would primarily be driven by interior flooding in the vicinity of building 2. Has a pretty significant likelihood score in operational impact of also 4, so overall rating of 16. So those 2 are in that top red band of really extreme risk to consider. In that case, we're suggesting a potential for automatic flood barriers at 2 of the single doors and passive flood barriers at 1 of the blow-up doors. And again, if you were to do a perimeter wall down, potential to protect against that. Future major storm events that causes flooding that would incapacitate plant utility transformers, that's the next row on here. Utility transformers are a little bit higher up, so they have a slightly lower potential or probability of occurrence, so we gave that a lower score. But obviously, if the transformers were to go down, your electrical feed would go down, and you'd have a loss of power, leading to a full plant shutdown, at least for a period of time until you could get the transformers brought back online. So much lower probability of that happening because the transformers are higher up, less likelihood of flooding, but clearly we would have a major impact, resulting in a 5 on the impact score and overall score of 10. In that case, elevating the utility transformers is the primary approach to dealing with that. Next one is having a major event that impacts UV buildings, electrical systems, of course, impacting disinfection and overall weir gate operations for the plant. And again, a quite low likelihood of occurring compared to the others on there. A significant regulatory impact, of course, if you cannot disinfect. And flood-proofing the individual entry points associated with that would be an approach. Again, possibly the perimeter walls. And the last one we have up here, the bottom row, has to do with a storm event that would impact overtopping post-aeration basins that would result in an inability to discharge from the permanent outflow. So basically, no hydraulic head. Tailwater, so get out of it. So possible solution there. Need some further analysis to figure that out, but then the effluent pump station would be the likely capital project that you consider in that circumstance. So possibly upgrading your storage. So that's sort of a high-level summary. Let's talk about what some of those solutions look like.
Can you go back one slide, please? How did you come up with the impact on the regulatory side? Are these regulatory impact on the books already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the financial, regulatory, and operational are directly pulled from our asset management program that we set up for entire operations.
I understand. Talking about the regulator, I see those in the books from the regulator.
The description
The
1 through 5.
regulatory impact.
Dr. Wong, the descriptions of 1 through 5 on the bottom. No, we came up with those ourselves. You know, there's either non-compliance all the way up to fines, definitely shut down.
We did our risk review. We started with what Alex Renew had already done in the management system, looked at over 5,000 individual assets. We used the existing impact scores. Most of our attention was how do we look at the probability scores from a climate.
We don't know if we get fined if we had a 100-year storm event and couldn't discharge because Hunting Creek's the same elevation as our post-air base.
You're gonna get fined.
It's definitely a possibility.
Well, I mean, so we erred on the side of caution, right? We just, you know, we don't know. But the descriptors, we wanted to be consistent across our analysis with the rest of our asset management program. That's how we came up with those descriptors a year and a half ago.
And also, I think you and I was, whenever you do mitigation.
Question
So-
is what, before you get into solutions and then temperature, looking at the issue of internal flooding. And one of my concerns over the years was Lake Barcroft Dam breaking. I know at one point they had done an inundation of if that happened. I mean, it happened in 1972. Now it's a cement dam and there's more attention paid to it. But it was, and the map that I remember seeing, it really is surprising how much of Alexandria gets flooded. Cameron Station, parts of Rosemont. You figure all the areas that are low, and we're below that. And I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to look at those or whether those have been updated to get an idea. Well, that's kind of our 100-year storm at 10 inches or something. That's.
We actually did look at that previous dam break analysis. I looked at the maps that you're probably referring to. I can't say exactly how far up it goes, but you're right, it does go fairly far into the city. Frankly, it's not much different than other riverine flooding scenarios that we have. And actually that type of an event would be driven by a riverine event in the sense that it would be excess flow coming down to Lake Barcroft, overtopping the dam, causing it to fail. It's not unlike some of the model results that we had in the previous riverine modeling results shown here. So it's definitely.
So the fact if it happened, clearly the scenario it happens, none of us can conjecture all the options that it might be. And in a sense, your scenarios and adaptations you're proposing here, kind of take it into account as much as you can kind of get an idea how high it might get if it did break.
I don't believe the flood depths, I don't think they actually had flood depths in that report. They just had the extent of the flooding, as I recall. But I don't think if you extrapolate flood depths based on that extent, I don't think they're any different than what was in that riverine flood map. So yes, these measures should be able to protect from catastrophic failure.
Thank you.
So I alluded to some of the types of solutions in the previous slide. This wanted to give you a visual what some of them look like. First one on the left is an automatic flood barrier. This doesn't require any maintenance. Essentially how this works is there's like a well that would sense the pressure of water as it's rising somewhere further downstream. When the water starts to rise, it actually causes the gate to physically open and block the entrance point. There's lots of different vendor versions of this. This is just one particular example. The next approach would be a manual flood barrier. Again, lots of different approaches. This one, basically, there are individual doors that gets dropped into a slot that would be pre-mounted on either side of the door, shown there. So that's one way you can do it, and other approaches are available. Last one on the top row is flood-proofing windows. If you go back to the image that Mallory showed, Building 69, some of those flooding was across the lower level of windows. So this idea is just to make sure that bottom window is strong enough to withstand the hydraulic pressure of water against it. So that's one thing to consider depending on how it's. Next one down is elevating equipment. This is an example of elevating a transformer. And then lastly, an example of potential perimeter. This is actually firm, but there's different versions of walls that can be installed around it. So you have to have a long length. So these are just some of the examples of the things that we use when looking at potential costs associated with protecting these locations. I was going to shift gears to heat. Okay, keep moving on to heat. Okay. As Mallory said, we looked not only at flooding, but also at heat. And we looked at heat both in terms of impacts on Alex Renew's staff, who have to spend a fair amount of time outdoors, as well as on equipment. Some equipment won't withstand temperatures that get above a certain temperature. So this graphic shows, we looked at 3 different stress metrics, depending on whether we're looking at people or equipment. We looked at something called the Universal Thermal Climate Index. which is a measure of heat stress for people working outdoors, dry bulb temperature, and of course, cooling energy demands. And again, we looked at thermal modeling across a variety of different scenarios, current 2045 and 2085. And the graphic here shows a whole year of projected temperatures and the maximum temperature at different times of day. The vertical line is 12 a.m. to 12 a.m., so a full day. So the simple way to look at this is the higher the amount of red on this, the longer the temperatures are above the threshold, which you have here is 79 degrees Fahrenheit, that UTCI number. That's the bottom of 3 levels of heat stress for staff. We ended up focusing on particular parts of the plants where staff operate. Spoke Alex, for your staff, where do they spend most of their time outdoors? So we ran, we have a team that actually can do modeling of different areas of the plant based on how much exposure they have, whether it's dark or lighter materials on the outside, they could actually do that type of modeling. This shows top row current 2045, 2085 on top of the BRBs, the biological reactor basins, and not surprisingly, red shows things that are getting up the highest temperature. So when you get to 2045, noon to 4 p.m., this is on July 15th, so one of those 2 hottest days of the year. You can see clearly from noon to 4 o'clock, it's getting pretty warm, and those more temperatures when you get out to 65. And this is just a map of the same information. This is the overall risk score. So the impact for staff was always considered a 5. We're getting above those thresholds. It's clearly a huge impact on them. So what's reflected here is a difference in the probability of getting above critical thresholds. So the secondary settling tanks had highest risk along with A, followed by the primary settling tank, building L, and see the rest of the colors there. Back to Valerie.
Yeah. So talking through adaptation actions for heat stress, we want to look at the hierarchy of controls here. Elimination and substitution, while of course the most effective approaches, are possible when the hazard we are talking about in this case is the sun. Can't eliminate, can't substitute that. So we are looking at engineering controls, so isolating people from the hazard, administrative controls, so changing the way people work, and PPE to protect our staff with equipment that can help mitigate risk. So getting into specific administrative controls, we need to be looking at shift and schedule changes in particular. For example, moving our outdoor intensive tasks away from an August mid-afternoon and to the cooler periods of the day, whether that's really early morning or really late at night. We need to also be looking at our rotation schedule and considering shortening our outdoor shifts so that we have staff moving between the hot and cool spaces more frequently. We also want to ensure we are building in structured cooling breaks at regular intervals to prevent overheating and working in pairs. This is a particularly useful approach given we do already host training for staff on recognizing signs of heat illness. As far as technological improvements, in some cases using drones for visual inspections may be a safer and a viable option versus manual inspection. Using SCADA to reduce some of our manual outdoor readings, obviously lots of capabilities there, so really maximizing our use of that. Implementing heat exposure monitoring via wearable devices. This could help provide alerts when staff start to reach those unsafe thresholds and before it becomes, a critical problem. And so now looking at our engineering and PPE controls, there are lots of opportunities here. We can modify the environment itself by investing in cool pavements or reflective roofing to reduce the amount of heat absorbed in some of these most common work areas. We can also look at installing permanent shade infrastructure, particularly in exposed areas. It is also worth noting that these types of mitigations are also going to be really effective for some of the equipment that we identified that is also sensitive to heat exposure. But again, thinking about personnel, we can staff. We are doing this currently, but there are different types of PPE we can leverage. This one being a cooling vest that is quite effective. And in the summer, we also want to be really intentional with setting up mobile cooling stations. Immersion cooling can help quickly lower core body temperatures. We definitely want to ensure that drinking water is readily available. We really don't want staff to have to travel too far to be able to reach either shade or hydration. So generally, best practice is to leverage a combination of mitigation measures. So all of these strategies will be integrated into our design guidelines and our SOPs with further analysis done on the optimal combination of strategies at any given site. Great, so moving forward, we wanted to illustrate here our timeline for the climate study deliverables, along with the key phase forward milestones. So one of our major goals with this study is to implement resilience strategies proactively, rather than having to address consequences of risk reactively. Obviously, we have a lot of opportunity ahead with phase forward to integrate resilience planning into our existing design plans, rather than reactively or as a separate project. You can see here how our climate deliverables align with the phase forward deadlines through 2026. We are very close to finalizing our guidelines, and it's a real priority for us to get that across the finish line so that we can maintain that coordination with phase forward and have those tools at the ready before those designs are complete. That brings us to our next steps. As I said, we are focusing on finalizing those climate design guidelines. The guidelines will apply to all capital projects and are going to help ensure we're accounting for climate risks across all of our future planning. We plan to also launch a climate visualization tool. This will be for our staff and contractors who will be able to pinpoint any location on our campus, evaluate the flood and heat modeling results at that location, and ensure design is accounting for those specific projections. We are integrating climate resilience with our CIP process by conducting a phased approach based on that risk matrix and those risk scores, and prioritizing projects with a high probability and high impact. We're making sure any planned upgrades, we're automatically rolling climate resilience into those designs. We're also updating and developing our climate-related SOPs, like our heat illness prevention plan and our hazardous weather SOP as well. And then lastly, we plan to publish a climate story map next year on the website, which is going to be a visually engaging representation of the study and our steps to protect the plant and the community. So together, all of these outputs are going to help us embed resilience into Alex Renewables' daily operations and into our long planning. So with that, we'll close out the presentation and happy to take any further questions.
Questions from the board?
I just said, this is great. Thank you. And on the safety side, just if you guys can deploy it quickly and see on the culture stuff.
I agree. Thinking 50 years ahead is always the right way to think in this business. One question about the past, though. You say, I think there are 13 access points to the underground tunnels that weave through Alex Renew. How close have we ever gotten to one of those being inundated?
Great question. Somebody with more history here than I have.
We know which entry point is the lowest.
Yes, that we do know. And actually, in our risk map, we actually have different colors for each of the entry points. -1 being the highest risk score, which usually means the highest probability because the impact is the same regardless of where it floods. well connected. Only has to go through one.
2018.
Gene?
No, it flooded. Galleries flooded. 2018.
It got into
Yep.
galleries?
Yes. It was wet year, you remember? Very wet year, and there was an issue with blinding of some tanks, and the tanks flooded out, and they flooded the plant, and it got into the galleries. At that point, we still had Building J. So Building J was flooded, and SCADA system was flooded. Building J doesn't exist anymore, thankfully. It's now a pump station that. But that was the last time something happened.
This worst case scenario has happened.
Not,
Not-
you didn't get the river flooding. It was more, you would call it interior flooding, but flooding from the plant caused flooding. So it's happened.
None of this stuff is hypothetical.
No.
Very good. Yeah. This is great.
Certainly, other agencies have experienced complete flooding. Hurricane Sandy flooded. National galleries. You don't want to get in that situation.
You consider doing what they do on ships, which is you have in your corridors, you've got doors that close, so if it starts flooding one place, it doesn't get the whole perimeter.
It should be evaluated, especially as was asked earlier, if you have lower points. One way you could protect those lower points and then have a green door so that if it is flooding, it's only that one section. I think we'd rather not have any galleries like this, so don't 1 second. That's something.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you
Great.
for this important work.
Excellent presentation.
Okay, moving right along, we have review and approve a contract, which is joint use, by the way. Community outreach and communication services. Mr. Carl.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Mr. Robertson presented last month on our plan, the outreach services. This is the contract. Technically, we don't have to bring this to the board. It's a non-professional services contract. So it falls under goods and services under the CO delegation authority. But we feel like the board plays a vital role in our community outreach plan, connecting with community members, and this is ultimately supporting our outreach for the community. So we wanted to follow the formal process with the board of directors for approval. We are requesting approval of a $916,000, $188 contract with ICF Incorporated, contract number 25024. This does not have any delegated authority. It is just a strict contract value per our policy. 2-year contract term with 4 additional 1-year renewal extensions. Mr. Robertson can give you a 2-minute overview of the proposed fee and, the value they bring to the organization. Sorry.
We did cover a lot of this last meeting, so I'll be brief. But if you'll recall, the scope essentially covered a website redesign for Alex Renew that included incorporating elements of River Renew into Alex Renew's sort of version of sites. And then it also supports capital projects. That's things like our Face Forward. And then also they'll just provide general communications, marketing, and outreach support. So that's things for like materials, that's all sorts of things that you see that we produce. We did a very thorough evaluation process. We received 28 proposals, as you might recall, so it took us quite some time to go through them all. ICF rose to the top. They were uniquely qualified to support us. They had personnel and as well as just the organizational experience where they've supported all kinds of utilities. So just to name a few here, they've supported through marketing campaigns for Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Salt River Project, which I actually know pretty well. They're well recognized in the energy sector, Baltimore Gas and Electric, Energy Star, Department of Energy. They also have done supported other groups, including the U.S. Postal Service and BMW. So they've have some pretty big name clients on their list. But we found them to have the best experience overall, essentially. It's pretty unanimous.
Any questions?
Where are they generally, where are the staff located?
They're all across the country. We have a PM that's based in Arlington and then another one that lives in Reston. They're somewhat local. The reps are for us.
On this here.
Thanks, man.
Any other questions from the board? Your motion,
So moved.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
Moving right into the monthly report.
Where are you going?
Sit up.
Yeah, I think focus on delinquencies, reflecting the report, and then over to LEAP, and then back forward to
Do we thought? I'm sorry.
page what?
Okay, so we jumped down to customer delinquencies. We saw another slight decrease in delinquency counts month over month. Amount owed. The one thing that I would point out this time is we've been discussing disconnections with the Virginia American Water. We had some really great conversations with our operations manager. He was able to streamline on their side a little bit, and his team, I should say, disconnected 57 customers this month, which is a fairly high number for us. I would say that I do not expect that to continue because we will see lower temperatures, so we won't be able to disconnect as well as during the holidays. For our purposes, it did increase payment plans and LEAP disbursements for this month. So that's somewhat encouraging from something that seems negative. And then I believe we already thanked you all for attending the Riverview Plaza Promenade grand opening. But thank you all again. The other thing that I'd like to point out we did in October that was, I think, really neat was we hosted all the Girl Scouts on our 6th floor in the area. So there was over 150 Girl Scouts here. They learned all kinds of STEM activities. And they were hosted by us as well as some of the other local water utilities. So that was great to see. We jump over to the LEAP dashboard. We did have 29 customers assisted this period. That's basically an all-time high for us. It's a jump from 16, which was also relatively high last month, and we're kind of continuing to see an increase here. I think that's in part due to just people learning about the program. It's been out there a year. You're starting to see the snowball effect, but we're also kind of diversifying our communication methods. So in addition to like the next door post and email chains, we started doing those 60-day, basically past due, oops, you missed your bill reminders, and that includes a link to LEAP as well. And then I wanted to touch a little bit on the next door post because we brought it up last time. We shared one post deal, which was the struggling to pay your bill. We have several that we've sort of run, and just to give you an idea or a sense of sort of the taglines that we're using, it's "You're not alone, we're here to help." Just simply eligibility criteria for LEAP. So we're trying kind of a number of different taglines, subject lines, I should say. And we haven't seen a tremendous difference in the performance, but it's still worth trying different ones. So for the month of October, we dispersed 24,000 dispersed, which was again probably our largest single sum to 29 customers. Go to the next slide, please. You can kind of see we're still seeing the same trends as far as the census tracts that are applying, I should say, for LEAP. Same with service disconnections. Nothing really has changed there. If you jump to the final page, this is a good sign. We had difficulty kind of fitting in all of the disbursements in the slide. So hopefully that's an ongoing trend. There were a couple of arrearages near the top that were larger than what we've seen in the past. These are customers that have really extended delinquencies going back, some of them to 2012. And just to give you all a sense, they do have a tendency to keep going on payment plans and sort of spacing those out in a strategic. So this month, they were disconnected and did receive a leave disbursement to get back. So that was all I had. If you don't have.
No, that's good. Good numbers.
Thank you.
Numbers go up.
Anything on the monthly report you'd like to highlight?
Just the revenue dashboard, we are nearing 90% completion. We're at 86% complete on the revenue program. We will be getting a deep dive of River Renew as part of the board retreat this year. So we have a guests lined up to talk about operations of similar tunnel systems and training of staff. And if you look at the last page of the revenue dashboard, you can see the board and staff cutting the ribbon at Pendleton Street with the mayor. And phase forward dashboard, I said this last month, but you look at the backside of the phase 4 dashboard. Our staff are ecstatic about this. By March of 2026, we will have removed the existing hex heat exchangers for the digesters, and they'll be replaced with new heat exchangers that will allow us to pivot away completely from pasteurization and heat the digesters with what replaces what you see in the pictures on the back of the dashboard. That will be the end of PrePass, a 20-year run. Served us very well, but moving forward to our short, medium, and long-term plan for biosolids management at Alex Renew. So we're very excited. Seems like a small thing, but it's huge to staff.
Yeah.
Great.
Mr. Jenks, any financial questions?
We're
Cash
a
reserve?
little bit ahead, but it's not enough to say, here comes the surplus. We'll just see in the months ahead how it goes.
Debt coverage is looking good. Any other questions on monthly? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Second, Mr. Jenks. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. And Ms. Meehan, it was not too data heavy. Right.
Basically, we had to go through it.